Hi, and welcome back to my channel where I'm going to cover the monk's Way of the Kensei class specialization from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass as well as explain and set up the various features gained. The Kensei monks tend to specialize more with weapons than any other monk classes, and this is because of the way that they see weapons as an extension of their martial expression. But unlike other monks who are able to use a very specialized list of weapons classified as monk weapons, the Kensei monks get a broader list of these options made available to them, which we will have a look at a little bit later in the video. As a result, these monks use their weapons more than they use their unarmed attacks, due to the very nature of their training. When your character reaches level 3, you will be able to choose this class specialization, or monastic tradition as it is called, and thus gain the various features that we will discuss next. But first I need to apply the level increase in order to trigger our class specialization selection. And we want Way of the Kensei. The first feature we are going to cover is called Path of the Kensei, and this is the feature that grants you the expanded list of weapons options that other monk classes and class specializations do not get to choose from. Almost the entire list of weapons in both the simple and martial weapons groups are now available to you. However, there is still a limited set of weapons, specifically those who have the heavy or special property associated with them, that you cannot take and will not be able to take. With one exception, the longbow. Despite it having the heavy property, it is still going to be a valid weapon for you to choose. Luckily enough, the weapons properties are conveniently made available to us right from the weapons list table. So I'm going to very quickly open up the Player's Handbook's Monk class sheet, scroll down until I get to the weapons list, and you will see here that right off of the right side of the screen, all of the weapons properties are listed. And that goes for all of the weapons that are here. So, the simple weapons list, there's very few, if any, that have any special or heavy property. In fact, I don't see one there. Same under the ranged weapons. But when you get to the martial weapons, you see here that there are several that have the heavy property. The only one that you can choose from will be the longbow, and that is under martial ranged. Yeah, and we can see here that it has the heavy property. Whereas everything else that doesn't have this heavy property is something that you can actually choose, with the exception of the lance, for example, which has special. So, you could take a battle axe, you could take a longsword, you can take the warhammer here. You can also choose the longbow. So, it doesn't necessarily give you access to everything, but it definitely broadens what you can take. You can even take a rapier, scimitar, or short sword if you chose. You will be able to select one melee and one ranged weapon with which you can tag as your monk weapon, and as such can be used for many of your monk features and are generally required for your Kensei features. Once you've selected the weapons, your character is going to gain proficiency in them if you did not already have proficiency with them. And later on, at levels 6, 11, and 17, your character will be able to choose a different weapon of either the melee or ranged weapons groups, as long as it follows the guidelines discussed earlier. However, when it comes to this area of the paragraph that explains that weapons changing process, it isn't clear as to whether it's a replacement or complementing of your existing weapon choices, meaning that does it replace the longsword that you selected initially, or does it give you another weapon you can use and select as you go through your character's campaigns? It's not entirely clear. I read it as replacement. So if you selected a short sword initially but want to switch to a longsword later on, this is how I would interpret that rule. But not only that, this feature grants your character some additional capabilities that work alongside your newly gained monk weapons, such as the Agile Parry, Kensei's Shot, and Way of the Brush options, which we will look at in a moment. First, I want to add my weapons. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and open up the monk class sheet again. Drag it down until I get access to the weapons sheet here, or table, and then I'm going to go and open up my inventory. I've already chosen, in my mind, the two things that I want to take, specifically the longsword and the longbow. Those will automatically show up in your Actions tab here because you've now added them. And they are also classified as monk weapons. So I'm going to give myself, just for the purposes of demonstrating this video, some ammunition for the longbow. Generally, however, you would have to go to a shop to actually be able to buy these things, not just simply give yourself these weapons. Now, I just noticed a slight correction that I need to make with this. It is using the strength bonus here. Actually, I don't know what it's using there, but it's actually a versatile weapon, or sorry, I should say this. It is a monk weapon, which means it should be able to make use of our dexterity. So instead of this being base for the attack, I want this to be dexterity. And same thing here when it comes to the damage. Oops, I want that to be dexterity. There we go. And that's because this is our monk weapon. Both of these are, which means that it's going to operate off of our dexterity, not our strength or anything else. Now, to ensure that my character can use them properly, I need to ensure that I'm proficient in them, and that's what this here represents. I also want to ensure that under my abilities proficiencies listing, I now have access to longbow and the long sword, because it's very specific when it comes to those proficiencies. There, and there's different ways that you can go about doing this. I do not believe this directly counts or toggles anything here. As we saw, I wasn't proficient in these, yet I was still proficient here. So I think this is pretty much just informative. So the format you choose here is entirely up to you. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the various options that you gain as part of this feature. And the first one is called the Agile Parry option, which gives your character the means to gain a defensive bonus when your character makes use of an unarmed strike. And yes, this does mean that you have to attack something without using your monk weapon to do so. This means your hand, head, or foot, which would most likely be the parts involved. However, as long as you're holding your Kensei weapon in your other hand, your character will gain access to a +2 bonus to their armor class until the start of their next turn. And as long as you continue to hold that weapon and do not become incapacitated, that bonus will stay around. This means we have to set it up. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and drag Path of the Kensei into place. I am then going to create a new power group called Way of the Kensei. Oops, if I could spell. And that's going to move this down to here. I am then going to slightly adjust this. I'm going to call this Agile Parry. And then I'm going to delete, or rather modify, this effect. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to call it Agile Parry, semicolon. In fact, I didn't have to do this, but whatever. And I'm going to go AC:2. And it is going to expire after 1 round, and it is going to be on self, and it does not expire on the next roll. And the way this works is that when you're in a situation here where you're going through combat, let's say that I used an unarmed attack. So that's just a combination of my dexterity +4. So I'm going to make my roll. That's a miss. Let's try that again, make my roll. What are the odds I would roll 2 1s on a video in a row? Can I make it a third? No? Okay, good. +4. So, okay. So that's going to hit one of these apes. I guarantee it because I know this character can hit with a 2. So, I'm then going to just simply roll a 1d4. So that'll be 1 point of damage. I'm going to drag and drop that onto ape 1 just for the purposes of showing how that was going to work. Now, until the rest of the turn, my character is going to gain an AC increase of 2. So that if this vampire hits, for example, I'm going to target that, make my attack roll. You should see now that we have a defensive effects bonus here of +2. Excellent. That means that this is working and it didn't go away. Now, if I continue on through the turns, it goes away. Excellent. That's what we want. Kensei's shot option, on the other hand, allows you to activate a damage bonus to your Kensei ranged attacks as a bonus action, such as that when you make your attack with your ranged weapon, it'll do an extra 1d4 points of damage, which unfortunately is what I just cleared from that feature. This benefit will remain until the end of your current turn. So if you get a chance to make a second ranged attack, such as with an extra attack that your character has access to, it will also be made with that extra die of damage, such that if you make 2 ranged attacks, both will gain the 1d4 bonus points of damage if they hit. So I'm going to return this to be Path of the Kensei. I'm then going to add in that new effect again, or re-add the effect, I should say, and this will be called Kensei Shot. Semicolon, DMG, 1d4. Now, technically, it's only supposed to stick around until the end of your turn, but unfortunately, there isn't an easy way to show this. So, for safety, I'm going to have the setup to expire automatically before your next turn starts. I'm then going to make sure it's on myself and that it's going to expire on the next action. And the reason I'm doing that is as follows. Whenever I make the attack roll, I just want to make sure that I add the damage effect. So if I go back into our combat tracker and I make an attack against the vampire here with the bow, so let's use this. Excellent. I'm going to then activate this feature and then roll my damage. You'll see that the 1d4 gets rolled. Now, at later levels, if I had an extra attack, and I'm going to make an extra attack here, just for the purposes of demonstrating this. See this 6 here? That is a miss, so I don't get to add the actual damage. Let's say I hit. Then what I would do is I would apply this effect again, and then roll for damage again. So that's how that would actually work. And as a final option for this particular feature, the Way of the Brush gives you proficiency with either the Calligrapher's Supplies or Painter's Supplies toolkits. Even though you won't gain the item itself, you'll be able to at least use them if you do manage to find or buy some at a later point in time. So, all we have to do for here is simply to go to our Abilities tab again and add in those 2 tools. So it's Calligrapher as well as the Painter's Supplies. You can put them both on the same line again, it doesn't really much matter. This is just informational, so it tells the DM and other players that yes, you are proficient with those particular supplies. At level 6, your character can now choose to replace one of your melee or ranged Kensei weapons, as this is one of the 3 levels that you can make this choice at, with the remaining levels being at levels 11 and 17. I am not going to make a change on my weapons this particular round, or this particular level. But also at level 6, your character is now going to be able to make use of the One with the Blade feature that extends your ki into the Kensei weapons, and grants you 1 passive adjustment to your Kensei weapons and a new option using ki points. The passive ability, called Magic Kensei Weapons, enables your Kensei weapon to make use of the magic property, which allows them to bypass resistances to non-magical attacks or damage. And to do that, we will very quickly need to make a minor adjustment. I'm just going to quickly shrink all that to all of our weapons here. So it's only going to apply to these 2 weapons, the longbow or the longsword. It won't apply to the sickle or the dart. And what we're going to want to do is put comma magic here. And that's it. It's a passive ability, which means this is now always going to be there. And that is to ensure that the damage itself will be able to get through whatever resistances happen to be in place. Now, I don't have anything here that is really resistant except for the vampire, so let's see if it actually works. So I'm going to make an attack against the vampire with my longsword. How many 1s am I going to roll in this video? That's the most 1s I've ever rolled. All right, so if I do this now, you can see that the resistance aspect to the vampire that we were seeing earlier in the damage partially resisted here, that is no longer there. That tells me that this property is now working and is bypassing the resistances that this vampire had. Deft Strike, on the other hand, is where you can choose to spend one key point and apply extra damage that will be equal to your character's martial arts die, but you can only use this option once per turn. Now, briefly, I haven't discussed what a martial arts die is in this particular video yet. That's simply because I've already explained it in the base class video where I recorded how I created and leveled up a base monk class. You're going to want to go check that out. But briefly, in your table here, you're going to be able to gain access to what's called a martial arts die. So our character is level 6, which means we can do 1d6 points of extra damage. So I'm simply going to expand out our monk here and our Way of the Kensei. I'm going to drop this into place, copy over our group, and I'm going to add a new effect. This is going to be Deft Strike, semicolon, and it's going to be damage 1d6. It is not going to last for a round. It's going to be on yourself, and it will expire on the next roll. Such that when I go through and I make my attack, let's see here. Yeah, when you hit a target. So it has to be done after you hit the target. That's the decision point. So if you roll your dice, that's going to be a miss. So if you roll your dice, that's going to be a hit. And actually connect. What you can do is at this point, before you actually go ahead and roll your damage, you can apply Deft Strike, and then you can roll your damage. The entire amount of damage is now going to be summed up and added to the vampire. So that's how Deft Strike works. And as you may have noticed, when this character levels up, so at level 11, for example, we'll want to make sure that we increase this to 1d8. And to show that, I've just increased our character's level to level 11. I'm now going to modify the one with the blade Deft Strike damage feature and make that a 1d8 as opposed to a 1d6. So that takes care of the first thing we probably should do when we turn level 11. Also, at this level, your character can once again decide to choose one of their melee or ranged Kensei weapons and replace it with another one. Again, I'm not going to go ahead and do that. It's fairly straightforward as to how you do that. It's the exact same thing that I did when I added the weapons in the first place, except in this case, I'd be removing, say, the longsword, for example, and adding a short sword, although I don't know why I'd go that route. And finally, at level 11, your character is also going to gain the Sharpen the Blade feature, which allows you to add additional magic damage and attack bonus damages to your weapons for a limited period of time. It will take up to 3 key points to apply this adjustment, but depending on the number of points you chose to spend, you can add the equivalent bonus to the selected non-magical weapon that would be equal to the amount of the key you chose to expend. For example, if you chose to expend 1 key point, then the non-magical weapon will effectively become a +1 weapon for the duration. But if you chose to use 3 key points, then you'd give that same weapon a +3 bonus as opposed to a +1 bonus. This affects both the damage and the attack bonuses, much like a normal magical weapons bonuses do, but it only lasts for 1 minute, as long as you don't use this feature again. Adding this effect is going to be relatively straightforward. I'm going to drag and drop this into place, copy the group, and set that up. I'm then going to preload 3 effects. 1 for each of the key points that I want to spend so that I don't have to worry about doing it again. I'm going to call this Sharpen the Blade. Semicolon, and it's going to modify both your attack and your damage bonuses. So what I've got here is ATK:1 semicolon DMG:1. It's going to last for 1 minute. It's going to be on your character, and it doesn't expend. So the duration is what controls when it goes away. I'm then going to copy all of this and modify the second one here, except I'm going to use a 2 for the damage. And set that to 1 minute and on self. And finally, the third one, 1 minute and on self. Now I've got everything set up for this. So how does this actually work? Well, what I would do is this. When in a combat situation, I'm going to make the decision that I'm going to burn 3 key points and add a +3 bonus to my character. Now when I go through and attack the vampire, it will do so with that +3 bonus. I'm going to use a longsword in this case. There we go. I'm then going to roll my damage. So you can see here that we had a +7 and a +11. So our +11 is just about right, although I don't know why it's +8, that's why, okay. So +8 plus the 3 from our magic weapon gives us the +11, and then the damage is 4 plus our 3 gives us the +7. If I remove this effect and choose 1 key point and add the +1, you'll see that we will do slightly less damage when it comes to our attack roll and our damage roll. So that would be an automatic miss. So that's now the 4th one I've rolled in this video. See, now we're only adding a +9 to our attack roll. That's a miss in this case, but let's say it hits, then the amount of damage we're adding is +5. So I know that this effect is working. So at level 17, there are a couple of things that we will now be able to do. The first is we will want to modify our actions tab here and adjust this 1d8 die that we have for Deft Strike to be 1d10, because that's when we gain the increase from 1d8 to 1d10. Next, we want to determine whether we're going to swap out our Kensei weapons. And in this particular case, I'm not going to do so again. Doing so should be relatively straightforward. You simply remove the proficiency here, replace it with the weapon that you've selected, and you remove the weapons from your inventory, and it should automatically update here. So it's not an overly difficult process to go through. And finally, the last feature that your character is going to gain is called Unerring Accuracy, and it allows you to reroll a miss once per turn. The attack would be against the same target, not against another target, though if you reroll a 1 for both of them, I might choose that your character does just that, and it might not be an enemy. And to be honest, that would be a bit of a DM's dilemma, because as of the rules of this feature, even a 1 is classified as a miss, which theoretically could mean you could re-roll it to avoid the critical miss in favor of a less critical miss, or a solid hit. And at level 17, I would argue you've earned the right to re-roll a 1. However, you've seen me roll 4 1s in this video. I have seen 2 1s rolled in a row by some of my players, and I would argue at this point that the first miss would have been bad, but the second one pretty much ensures something really, really bad is about to happen. But I am curious as to what others think in relation to that, so feel free to drop a comment below the video and let me know what your thoughts are around that. Now, unfortunately, this isn't an effect that we need to add to our Actions tab, because you're essentially giving yourself the ability to re-roll an attack. Everything for that is already set up on our Actions page. We don't necessarily need this. A DM might want this here for completion, so yeah, just drag and drop it into place, throw it into the same group, and then whenever you're going to use Unerring Accuracy, and I have no idea why I have such a hard time saying that, click it, and then it will show up in the actual chat tab there. But that does bring us to pretty much the conclusion of the monk class for the Way of the Kensei. And as I've said before, the monk is a very serious class for the player to play. And while I kind of agree that the Kensei seems to be a little bit underpowered by the features that they gain, keep in mind the weapons your character gains as part of this class specialization are classified as monk weapons. So you're countering something that you would normally use your sickle for or your unarmed strike as, with the fact that you can now use a weapon to make that strike. This means also that you can now use them for all of your key features that include the use of a monk-related weapon, thus giving you a massive damage increase as a result. However, this does bring us to the end of the video, and I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.